all enjoyed the tournament so far and that this is going to be an excellent open final. I very fortunately am blessed with the privilege of not getting to judge this, which means that I can introduce the respected speakers and judges as well. Hopefully in a way that's somewhat lighthearted, since I am alongside a certain member of a team here, the champion of the recently concluded Umar. Alright, first insight, before that, the motion for the House reads, this House prefers a brave new world to the status quo in Western liberal democracies. Inside proposition, we have two Dinos and a Novice walk into a bar. As first speaker, we have the ever persistent Abdul Wassay. He has become a cornerstone of the circuit in a very short amount of time, and the fact that he remains a kind and sane person despite having to interact with the circuit repeatedly is a great testimony. Second, we have someone who needs no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway, Taha Masud. Kaihan Masud is a nightmare not only for every speaker who walks into a tournament, but even for the cap, because every judge wants to not judge and instead watch him speak. At number three, we have Ashar Imran. Some of you may not know that Ashar Imran was part of a once very successful pairing called LUMS the People. That pairing, one member of that pairing went on to be very successful, very well spoken, articulate, wealthy, and doing quite well in life. And of course, the other one is Ashar Imran. Outside opposition, we have the team Fikr, Faaka. At first speaker, we have Muhammad bin Munir, who is dealing exceptionally well with the fact that his co-coach has fled. At second, we have Bakhtiyar Ahmed. Bakhtiyar Ahmed is the current reigning champion of LUMS Asians. Last year he won with the older generation. This year he's trying to get the younger generation to win with him. And speaking of younger generation, at number three we have Umar Yaseen. Given the fact that he's speaking the final and his brother is not, I think it's time to change around the coaching team of TCS Janab. In the judges, we have at first chairing this panel is Lyba Bashir. In equal measures feisty and in equal measures small, which is reflected in the pets that she owns. She owns a parrot and a Labrador mix. Second, we have Hanfeyah, who after repeated attempts of trying to win a LUMS trophy has decided that he is going to contribute to deciding who gets a LUMS trophy. At number three, we have Marziya Rasheed. She was an integral member of the LUMS team that spoke the UADC semi-final this year. It's actually funny, although I don't know a lot about Marziya, it's funny that I believe she hadn't had a lot of debate experience before UADC, which shows that repeated exposure to the activity is perhaps not always the best way to get better. Fourth is JT's finest, Ahmed bin Tahir. He first joined the law school at LUMS, but then realized that money is far more important, and therefore decided to switch to SDSP. At fifth, we have Ali Osja Bukhari, a GCU student who's had multiple adjudicator breaks internationally quite recently, and he's also quite adept at apparently breaking batsmen's faces when he's bowling. Next, we have Ahmed Subhani, who is forever destined to be the director of debate affairs at Drums. I'm sure he'll be doing that for many years to come. Next, we have Samir Asad, who has followed Hassan Kaisar to ISL, to Trinity, but not yet to the Madrasa, so we're going to Second last, we have Hassan Askari, who despite the fact that HSN traumatized him, is still here and debating. Credit to him for that. And lastly, we have Shezreen Shah, the vice president of Drums, following in the footsteps of one of our older coaches, who we all remember very fondly. And despite the fact that she was coached by that particular gentleman, she's reached the heights that she has in debating. So yeah, that's the final. Just a bit of housekeeping. Observers, please, just maintain a general sense of decorum during the match. Everything else is, of course, according to all the rules we already know about. Without further ado, Prime Minister, you have the floor.
before starting, of course, thank you to Taha for carrying me through the tournament and making it the final of the Novice.
Wassay, आपको थोड़ा सा ऊंचा और बोलना है.
Can I just get
Yeah, you can use the mic. Mic सामने पड़ा हुआ है. कोई भी और sound होगा ना, it will get a bit difficult. एक second.
Am I audible now? Okay, wonderful.
Just wait one. उसको in the side. It's the first one.
Two Dinos and a Novice walks in the final and probably going to take the trophy.
Wait, I need a pen. This pen is dead.
There's extra pens here. Passing a mic here also. Ashar.
I've literally never used a classroom microphone in my life.
This was सही चल रहा है.
Ashar, Salisbury weekend.
No, I got them changed yesterday.
Just for those people.
ठीक है, आवाज आ रही है?
Yeah, it's fine.
So I tried to joke, but
No,
mic फिर से बंद हो गया. So I guess I don't know about the mic.
Chilla.
I think वो पीछे जा रहे हैं, like it's not running. थोड़ा सा अगर आप.
If you want, you could speak from this chair actually.
नहीं ठीक है, आवाज आ रही है.
Yeah, this
ठीक है,
is
wonderful.
Guys.
Starting in 3, 2, 1. Couple of pieces of setup before I move on to my positive idea. Number 1, this is all probably going to be before birth, which means you either are an embryo or in the mother wombs. P, it is going to be socially conditioned, which means that you are going to be in a competent state, and B, you are going to believe in the state to do your furtherance. B, it is also going to make you feasible for specific jobs that requires either if the job requires physical strongness, it is going to make you physical stronger. If a job requires you to be intellectually superior, it is going to make you intellectually superior. The jobs are, of course, going to be selected by state. Number 3, as many citizens, because state has an incentive to make citizens that are greater than human, because this obviously benefits the state, we think there is a less likelihood of them actively making policies or actively making humans that in itself harm them. B, last piece of framing, material needs are going to be and physical needs are going to be met, which means we can generally assume that they're going to live an upper middle class life, which means they don't have to worry about things like A, hunger, do not have to worry about poverty, they don't have to worry about illness, they don't have to worry about overwork because they are now potentially able to do their jobs the way they want to do their jobs. But B, you don't have crimes in this sort of things. But number 1, the entire social body is in complete harmony, because we don't think a state is going to make people that are going to fight each other, which means because we have a fiat to assume that they're going to be socially engineered, we think they're likely going to be conditioned in a way that they don't fight with each other for a better productivity of the state overall. But number 1, before I move on, yeah.
The point is you socially engineer them at birth, yes, but the point at which they inquisition and have rationality, they're probably going to question the state's decision at some point in time, not making it permanent social conditioning.
We think no, because A, oftentimes you question things because your people around you start doing different things or things that you assume to be different. We think this is less likely going to exist because people around you are similar to you, which means that you're less likely going to question this stuff. But even if you're going to question this stuff, we think there is less likelihood of you failing or failing to do jobs. But number 1 piece of framing, you are going to remove all sort of bad things. But before I move on, we think in current status quo, Western liberal democracies are prosperous but not the best. Why? Because 1 in every children is hungry, welfare states are crashed. You have more and more homeless people, you have more and more hungry people in these states. No access to any meaningful healthcare in this Western democracy that exists. We remove every sort of material deprivation that you have in the society. Why this is something that is the most unique benefit that you can get from side proposition. Number 1, every sort of harm or approximate form of harm that you get is from material needs. It is embedded in our biological code, which means that your body screams at you to do better if you have this material deprivations. Millions of years of human development leads to a point where you actively feel the need to end. But number two, we agree that there are going to be some psychological harms because we A, think that the psychological harms directly linked to you having this material deprivation, but B, oftentimes there might be certain ways when you have psychological harms that lead to material deprivation, but we think they are going to be less likely on our side of the house. Or even if this exists, the proximate harm is going to be more higher on their side of the house. But number two, you will never have to worry about surviving. Why this is something that is important, and this leads to my first positive impact, that this is going to be a world that is going to have lesser crime in Western liberal democracies. Why do people commit crimes? There are several reasons, but most important reasons are they don't have better utility or better access to resources. Their material and physical needs are not met, which means that often times the crimes they commit are crimes that society forced them to do. But number two, their social upbringing. They might be in a society, or they might live in a family that actively promotes crime and other stuff. We think the moment in time is these states have lesser incentive to make the societal engineer the specific day that they want to do so, which means that you have a better society in our side of the house. In instance, if you have a better society, but in instance, if you don't have material deprivation, it actively means the incentive to crime is going to be way less on our side of the house. This is specifically good because A, you have lesser crimes on our side of the house, but B, you have more safety on our side of the house. But number two, more complex social harms are going to be eliminated on our side of the house. What does this look like? Oftentimes, discrimination actually arises from material deprivation. This looks like black people in the community are bad or are seen as bad because they don't have access to the resources that other people have. We think in our side of the house, they are going to have at least the resources to A, meet their material needs, but B, meet their physical needs as well. Which means at that moment in time, they're less likely going to be discriminated against this. But B, we think there might be some level of discrimination on other factors that exist on our side of the house, but in the longer run, when A, these people have lesser incentive to fight against each other, this discrimination is less likely not going to exist on our side of the house. You eliminate bad roles from society. What does this bad role look like? A, I have already talked about criminals and terrorist groups that you have. You get more socially programmed people that are not born criminals. But number two, there are a lot of agencies that exist in the society that actively harms the government motive. This includes private sectors like private banks that actively don't want the government to prosper. The moment in time when you actively make or socially engineer people in a way that they don't go against the state, you actively eliminate all of these operations on your side of the house, on our side of the house too. This is good because now you have a society that does not have that much resistance, and the resistance that actively harms the society to begin with. Which means at that moment in time, you're able to make sure that people work for the state of goals. State goals are easier, much easier to implement on our side of the house, and we almost like to think that these goals are going to be good. But lastly, a preemption, because opposition might talk about that you need social rights and free wills that are going to exist. We A, think social rights and free wills are overrated. Why? We A, think we do not know if free will actually exists in the society because A, in the status quo, your average action is A, predetermined. But B, even if it's not predetermined, it actually is influenced by other factors like society, the resources you have, lottery of birth stuff still exists on their side of the house. Opposition may say that maybe you can actively earn money and come out of the lottery of birth or come out of poverty. We think A, this is less likely, but B, even if it's something that is true, it outweighs all of the harms that they have on their side of the house. But number two, we think even if free will is something that is valuable and exists, in the comparative, we fulfill your economic needs and deprivation, societal upbringing, when people do things, in society in itself, people do things that they don't want to do. What does this look like? People doing jobs that they don't want to do because they need capital to do different things. People going to school, obviously you don't want to do. People debating just because of college applications and other stuff that exists in the server house. Which means at that moment in time, your free will in itself is something not going to exist, such as Taha and Ashar speaking with me without knowing why they're speaking with me, but they are. But lastly, what are the impacts that we prove to you? Number one, we remove material deprivation. B, we remove bad things on our side of our house. We eliminate hunger, poverty, illness, and overwork. All of these harms are harms that are going to exist on side opposition side of the house. For all these reasons,
Big boss, big boss. Fikr spoke for 7 minutes, 18 seconds.
Call upon leader of opposition.
Calling upon leader of opposition.
Yeah.
drums for hosting this event. It has been quite successful to host 4 rounds in one day, despite my disagreement with Daud. I also would like to thank my friends, Bakhtiyar, Umar, Aliza, Daud, everyone who has encouraged me really. Just to clarify, I am not 35 years old, I am just 21 years old, so I am not a dino or something like that. Alright. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. There is only one premise on which the proposition bases their case on, which is the idea of rationale. If I'm able to break down that you as an individual within this society are likely to be rational, think about things, etc., question things around you which are happening and make those decisions that you wanted to make but do not have the ability to make, is something that leads us to winning this debate. Their only argument is that now because you have a unified society, you're likely to not commit crimes. You're not likely to do anything that goes against the values of the state. We believe that this is inherently not possible, because understand this, on their side of the house, they're not opening up a factory under which you have robots who go into the workplace, come out of the workplace, go home, sleep, etc. There are different roles that exist within the society. By the virtue of different roles existing within the society, it means that the socialization that is going to happen amongst individuals is going to be different. This simply looks like that there will be, intellectual clashes. There would be the idea of, different people acting out against, different values, etc., because they would like to think that there is some sort of problem of us being controlled, right? But the only problem that we have then is that that control does not materialize into them questioning the ability that is controlling them, which is the state, because you have never allowed them to do so. I think that frames out their whole idea. But why are you likely to be rational within this whole debate, right? We believe that the idea of internally questioning things around you is very, very intuitive to argue, right? Because I am as an individual, I'm going to question my action. I'm going to watch people around me. Why are they successful? Why am I in this position? Why am I, an engineer, or why am I a social worker, or why am I a construction worker, right? Because all these things are likely, sit down, all these things are likely to make my rationale. If that rationale exists, I am likely to question things. Insofar as that is possible, we believe that that is where, the debate actively starts. But before that, only one piece of framing within this debate. What do Western liberal democracies look like? I'll just tell you 3 key words and I'll move on to my argumentation. Voting and representation, identity, changing things, etc. Right? This is where my argument comes in. The idea of how you strip away these people from autonomy and why that is so crucial. But also before that, even with all the benefits that the proposition is trying to argue, they can never override the principle of autonomy, which we'll set in this debate. The first idea then, if people are genetically modified, state decides what sort of person you are. I.e. if you're a construction worker, if you're an intellectual person, etc. Understand this. This is not synonymous with the idea of you wanting to do this, right? Why is this? Because by the virtue of your socialization, you engaging with people in different roles, you are likely to, think and question things that you're doing, right? We believe that prop cannot assume that this is the only thing that you will want just because you're modified to do that. Because understand this, a human being consists of dreams, etc. They are not striping away a human being of their dreams, the goals that they want to set, the ideation of what education you want to get, right? You might want to do something, but then the comparative in this debate is very simple. Because understand this, in liberal democracies, while you have autonomy, your autonomy allows you to engage in efforts. It allows you to engage in pursuit of happiness, in pursuit of achieving what you actively wanted to achieve to, right? This also leads to the idea of feeling what you want, feeling in control of yourself. On proposition, you are reduced to a function in the society who isn't allowed to achieve what they want to. But again, if I take them on their best, even if you achieve the dream that the state set for you, and state allows you to dream and set goals, the intrinsic value of that dream does not exist. And this is crucially important, because understand, basic and physical needs being met, such as food, shelter, healthcare, does not override all your other needs, because those are the needs which actively make you human. Your wants. Sit down, sir, right? Understand this. The idea of making a system individually and social, allowing the individual to socially and individually at least
try to fulfill that dream, try to evolve as a human being is something that we vouch for, right? The choice for what my needs should be in my hand, because life consists of one thing, that is identity. Understand, the point at which the state strips you of that, and by the virtue of identity being connected to your sexuality, your historic preferences, your culture, the state strips you away from all those things. If state decides what you want, then it is also likely to crack down on you, because this is very crucial in this debate. If even one individual speaks up against the state, it is likely to be under threat, because then the whole system is under threat, right? And that is inherently important for this. Then the comparative becomes that about liberal democracy becomes that maybe you are coerced in liberal democracies. You might not achieve your dreams. You might suffer in quite a lot of instances. But there is a room of progression and evolution that still exists, right? Because you have autonomy. You can go out and ask for that change. You can practice your dreams and make an active effort to achieve those dreams and practice your identity. Even if you're suffering, you have that time to evolve. But also, why is this autonomy essentially important? If by the virtue of socialization, you can just question even one thing in your life. Why am I walking over here? Why am I ending up within this degree, etc.? It leads to a choice. That choice is what leads to active progression, right? What is this progression that we are talking about? And the three words I said at the start of my characterization. We believe that this progression actively looks like, legislative progression within, the liberal Western democracies. This looks like you, by the virtue of having the ability to elect a government, giving in your input in that democracy, you feeling that I have some choice and control over my circumstance, my life, right? This also means that by the virtue of democracy being self-correcting, the paradigm that shifts as a society is there. The progression is present over there by the virtue of society changing. This simply looks like the idea of slavery, right? The point at which the society realized there is something wrong, it evolved to allowing it. And that is the progression that we are arguing for, right? We believe that states are essentially made by their preferences, by the choices that they make. The quality of life, the safety and agency of expression, the protection of identity, the welfare that is constantly given to these people is essentially important, because understand this, your identity consists of your choices, the way you interact with people, the way you want to feel whatever is happening to you, and what sort of actions you want to take in those circumstances. Insofar as that evolution exists, that evolution allows you to bring change within the society. This allows you to ask for change within the society, such as, all the social justice movements asking for change in the society because they have the choice to do so. The point at which you are closed down, you cannot ask anyone for change, even if you can question your situation, is the point where you are not a human being, you are a robot, you cannot be a part of a functioning society. So proud to propose.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes, 10 seconds, calling upon second speaker properly.
If you accept everything opposition has said and literally concede to all of it, which we're not doing, but just hypothetically for a second, you end up with a race of robots without autonomy. But better a race of robots who are happy, healthy, have all of their needs fulfilled than a race of humans who frequently suffer extreme forms of disutility through hunger, through pain, through worry, through criminal enterprise at their expense. We have no reason at this point to believe that autonomy is an overriding, prevailing principle that outweighs everything else in this debate, and I think at the end of this debate, neither will you. A couple of things I want to discuss here, primarily in rebuttal. First of all, they claim that by virtue of the fact people are still rational, you do not get to access our benefits on no crime, no actions against the state, yada, 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 yada. I have a couple of responses to this. First of all, the vast majority of crime does disappear because crimes of necessity no longer exist by default because necessity doesn't exist. So yes, sure, sadists might still commit crimes. I'm not going to contest that. That might happen. No big worry to me. Secondly, I think that to the extent that they want to claim people will still have treasonous opinions toward the state, I think they're likely to stay at the level of treasonous opinion, because people with full bellies have a tendency not to revolt and to endanger their own positions or to take any meaningful anti-state action. So sure, yeah, some people might be unhappy. I don't think they'll do anything about this unhappiness, and I don't think they'll be severely unhappy enough to the point that this severely acts as a detriment to their quality of life. Their second claim then, you're likely to question a bunch of things which makes you unhappy just by virtue of the fact that you're questioning. By first response, the vast majority of people do not critically question the world that they live in. I think that the clearest warrant we have for the fact that the vast majority of people uncritically accept their social and cultural world is the fact that religions transfer almost identically through families. That is to say, the country you are born in, the religion you are born in, has a 99% chance of being something you deeply and strongly identify with, implying that you frequently do not question the world you are born into, and in fact are very okay with it. So if you're socially engineered to believe in this, I think it's very likely it has the same degree of success as nationalism or religion in the status quo, which is it is overwhelmingly likely to work, and you are overwhelmingly likely to buy into it. But secondly, I think there's an additional reason why you're not likely to question that heavily, which is you get an increased sense of purpose inside this model as well. Because recall, you are genetically engineered to be super good at doing specific things. This means two things for your sense of purpose. Number one, by virtue of the fact that you are good at whatever role you have been assigned, you feel happy knowing that you are doing a good job. We feel rewarded when we do good work. This is why when we succeed in academics or in work or anywhere, even if we don't fundamentally care about what we're doing, we feel a sense of accomplishment because we know we just did a damned good job. This is why even if I don't like a debate topic, if I win the debate, I feel really happy about it because I know I executed well. But secondly, you also know quite literally you were made for this. I think the sense of purpose that this can imbue somebody with cannot go understated for the same reason that this is the sort of logic people use when they talk about the dreams they want to discuss. When we think about dreams, when we think I was made to be an actor, that is the language we think in. This is what I was destined for. There is no clearer sense of destiny than having been genetically engineered at an embryonic stage to become something later in life. This is the fulfillment of dreams, not the dodging of them. This engages directly on that. Their next claim, and this is where the remainder of the rebuttal and engagement happens, is on the principle of autonomy, or if you like, the importance of free will and social rights later on. First of all, I want to point out what this analysis neglects. It neglects, crucially, why material needs and material concerns always precede immaterial ones. I'm not going to repeat all of Abbas's analysis, don't worry, Hanfeyah. But what I am going to note is that material needs, by virtue of being something that are built into us biologically, hunger, pain, are something we cannot negotiate with. They cannot be therapized away by reasoning. Consequently, by virtue of the fact that these are just distinct evolutionary attacks upon our being, they are prior to anything else. But secondly, this also neglected all of the social harms we mentioned, which eliminated also as a consequence of this. Notably, I want to add one more here. This eliminates the sense of worry from day-to-day life, because never again do you have to think about how you're going to feed your family, what you're going to do in the future, what you need to do. In fact, if anything, I think frequently free will leads to you feeling distressed in day-to-day life because it gives you too many options. You don't know exactly what the best choice to make at any given point in time to optimize your life chances is. Now you don't have to. And I think that is a relief which you do not get to access in a world where you have to worry about liberal democracy. But moreover, we also talked to you about how entire social structures like racism are unlikely to replicate inside the state, because why would the state want to create a situation in which its social organ is internally dividing? I think it's very likely that to some degree they might try to just genetically engineer things like race out of the question. If they can't, I think they will socially engineer people to not care about these questions, meaning that the fabric of society is not riven by internal conflict. Their next claim then, and I want to respond more aggressively to the dreams point here. They said, what about the dreams you want to live out? First of all, you can have dreams which have nothing to do with your job. Like presumably we're not stopping you singing in your free time. So I think insofar as dreams are primarily achieved through your hobbyist side of life, you can still access those, possibly greater in our world because you are no longer restricted by economic need and hardship in every other sphere of life. Secondly, and this is the flip of this, you 99% of the time cannot achieve the sorts of dreams they want in the status quo. When your health is bad, you cannot become a singer. When you're murdered in an armed robbery because somebody didn't have a loaf of bread to eat, you cannot go and achieve whatever you want in life. You do not functionally have access to the dreams and growth you want. Their attempt to dodge around this and save themselves is to say there's room for progress. This is where I tell you liberal democracies are getting worse in the status quo, not better. So their mechanisms for change do not seem to be actualizing in reality. There are two ways in which they're getting worse. Firstly, on an economic level, Western liberal democracies are actively getting poorer. Note, we can fiat economics on our side because we have the right to believe material needs are felt. They do not have anything comparable on their side. They have to defend Western liberal democracies and their existing material conditions. The consequence of this then is they're defending a world driven by energy crisis, by a diminished share of the global pie, where inside the United Kingdom, 1 in 5 school children are going to school hungry at this point in time, in spite of being some of the supposedly richest countries in the world. These are material harms which will continue to escalate if we continue following trends which are happening in the status quo, as countries like China, Russia, etc. become bigger and eat up larger shares of the global economic pie, leaving left behind for them. Before I go on, if there's a point. The second thing that's getting worse in Western liberal democracies is the rollback of social and political rights, the things they want to talk about. Because if their claim is you get greater autonomy and social rights, I want to know two things. First of all, abortion was lost to the United States very recently, which means there's certain types of rights which are just actively in the state of rollback. But secondly, insofar as the right to expression and stuff, pro-Palestinian protesters are being locked up and denied job opportunities on a daily basis. I think, again, the West is demonstrating that it is increasingly rolling back political and social franchise. If that's the claim you want to rest on, it's not one which meaningfully exists in any realistic level in the status quo. Finally then, I want to reiterate and develop a little bit further on the idea of why social rights, independent of all of this, are relatively unimportant compared to economic ones. First of all, and this is what Wassay pointed out to you, free will is shaky. We don't actually know if free will exists or if this is all biological determinism. Therefore, hedging all of your bets on trying to respect and restore free will and social rights is to me a shaky guess. Secondly, social rights without economic rights are meaningless. It doesn't matter if I can vote if I cannot afford to take the day off to vote, basically, right? Because I need that job to feed myself. So social rights in a world where economic rights are not guaranteed is bad. Thirdly, people having revealed preference for economic rights, people in countries like China, which aggressively prioritize material rights over social rights, consistently rank happier than people inside countries which do the inverse like the United States by massive margins. The vast majority of Chinese people are happy, the vast majority of Americans are not. The takeaway from this debate then is that social rights meaningfully don't matter compared to economic ones, and we uniquely eliminate that greatest of human evils, material deprivation. On those grounds, very proud of you.
Speakers vote for 7 minutes, 16 seconds, following second speaker opposition.
Permission of Ahmed? Material needs do not always precede individual and innate needs that you might have apart from it. Social rights may exist in absentia from material needs. This is why people in Bhutan rank higher than people in China. This is why the Brexit vote happened, even though you were going to be more economically poor on your side of the house by leaving the economic treaty. This is why people in Syria fight a war that you might lose, even though you might know that material wealth might not happen on your side of the house. The principle of autonomy is not just that you exercise your actions. The principle of autonomy is not just that you are allowed to do what you want. It is that you feel that you can do what you want. This is the important characterization that proposition misses from that. Because at the moment in time that I feel that I am being controlled by an external actor is the point in time in which these benefits do not matter. This is where this debate will get decided. Because I think autonomy on their side of the house is not contingent on just social conditioning. Intrinsically critical thinking does not happen only in regards to religion, into your spirituality, into thinking about personhood in terms of predefined notions that society puts on. It is defined by my very speech in which I breathe, in which I talk. It is just thinking about yourself in your idle time and what you do in your life. The predefined ideas of socialization that Munir already gave you tell you that people will continue to think regardless. You will not have robots. You will have individuals that are socially conditioned to an extent, but who will continue to question that particular social conditioning and will continue to have questions. These questions will eventually lead you to the conclusion that you are not controlling yourself. Because the state only allows you to do one job. The state only allows you to do one thing. Therefore, meaning at that particular moment, you will believe that the state has defined for you what you want. In a deterministic world, the illusion of free will is what we vouch for at opposition. Even if we are not able to prove that all choices are not coerced, we can still prove that individuals do not know that they are being coerced in the Western liberal democracy that we are talking about. This is important in terms of this debate, because individuals are then not able to derive pleasure not just from the material needs that Masud himself quite correctly outlines, but people are also able to feel that these needs may serve a purpose grander than their own in this particular scenario, meaning that individuals may feel that they are allowed to have needs apart from the material needs that the state in and of themselves defines. The reason why autonomy becomes important is that the moment in time when I feel that my autonomy is being controlled by an external actor is the moment in time in which all joy or pleasure that I might derive from my actions is taken away from me. We think this is principally correct because it is not just an external subjective opinion that I'm placing onto an internal point of view. We think an analogy of perhaps the heroin addict is particularly relevant, right? Because we think the heroin addict might have real preferences for injecting himself with heroin. But the moment in time in which he's sober, even though the preferences may be real, he can still regret those preferences existing in those particular moments. This means that even though material needs may be a precondition towards happiness, they do not conceive of the sufficient conditions for happiness. This means that my preferences to eat and to sleep and to have shelter might be real, but they are not enough. Because I aim to conceive of myself as a positive, autonomous being, not being controlled by the syringe that I'm injecting into myself. This is the autonomous principle that we uphold in our side of the world, because individuals, even if they're accessing all of those benefits, do not feel as if those benefits are directed at them. They are only directed at functions of the state, not at the person themselves. Therefore, meaning at that particular moment, it occurs upstream of all analysis that government can quantify in regards to the material benefits that you can get, because you don't experience them as a person, you only experience them as a function of society, therefore meaning you don't get any benefit. But before that, yes, Masud.
You agree that people don't meaningfully have free will, but believe they do, which enhances their enjoyment of Western liberal democracies. Why don't the same delusional people believe they have free will, even in the world?
I mean, it's simple, right? I think the info slide states that the social order can't be changed. Do not take it as saying that everyone will suddenly accept it. Because I can do things even if my trying to do that thing will result in failure. I can attempt to kill all of you in this room, I'll probably fail. But at that point in time, I'll probably be engaging in terms of an action that I know will result in failure, but I still want to carry it out. This becomes important in terms of the way individuals interact with society. So because I cannot move away from my job, because I cannot change your genetically modified preferences even if I want to, and because I think about them, individuals will know that their lives are predetermined because the state wants them to know that their lives are predetermined. This is extensive in terms of the impacts that it has, because the illusion only persists in the Western liberal world. It only persists in the Western liberal world by virtue of the things that Munir has already outlined for you. That you have preferences that change with time and voting patterns change with time, that you are allowed to change perhaps your identity and culture and traditions, that you're able to even cling to them in times when you want to. The reason this is important is because individuals think these things are important and therefore they hold meaning for them. This meaning in and of themselves then allows them to access the benefits that these things provide, as opposed to just thinking that everything is defined by the state in and of itself. Therefore, meaning I as an individual exercise no positive autonomy and I do nothing. The function of the state is essentially extended on their side to the function of the person. Therefore, meaning at that particular moment, we don't think there's any significant benefit on that. The second thing I'm going to talk to you about is in terms of the mental harms that happen. Masud says in a predetermined world, we're probably not going to worry this. But in a world in which the illusion of free will persists, you're probably going to have things on their side of the house, you're probably going to have things like paranoia and schizophrenia, and just a general thought that maybe my thoughts are not my own because they have been genetically modified or socially modified. Thereby meaning at that particular moment, you don't just think about, being controlled in certain aspects of your life, but it being controlled in terms of your entire being. Therefore, meaning at that particular moment, paranoia or schizophrenia or all the mental harms exist more on their side. Munir already preempted how Western liberal democracies are going to get better. It's not simply about them doing economically poor. They're doing good in terms of identity representation. They're doing good in terms of just handing out democracy and votes. But I think the principal justification for democracy within this debate, and they cannot argue democracy because the social order cannot be changed, is that the state's coercive power owes a principal justification to the vote in and of itself. This means that the state's coercive power to control my actions is only justified by my right to decide how that coercion takes place and how the state in and of itself can conceive of coercion. Therefore, meaning at that particular moment, if I don't have representation in terms of the coercion in and of itself, I don't opt into the state, and therefore there's no principal justification for the decline. The last harm in terms of material needs. The economy can still improve in a democracy, because you can elect a better party with a better manifesto. On their side of the house, you have slaves who are rendered unable to access any benefit because that benefit is not yours, that is the benefit of the state. Again, this occurs upstream of any benefits that they've quantified because as an individual, you do not feel that those are your own for all those reasons.
Speakers vote for 7 minutes 20 seconds, calling upon close proposition.
I still need 30 seconds though. Cheering was great. Before I start, I want to thank myself for giving the speech that I'm about to give. I want to thank all of you for the trophy you're inevitably about to give to me. There are two things that Bakhtiyar owed to me in this speech. He owed to tell me why choice A exceeds and is better than like the amounts of positive impacts you have coming from Masud and Wassay's speech. The second thing he owed to tell us was why you feel that, why you suddenly start critically evaluating the amount of free choices you can or cannot make, given Masud's analysis on religion, predeterminism, and how a vast majority of people right now, even though they are told their lives are predetermined, they believe their lives are predetermined, still delusionally believe in the freedom of choice, still delusionally believe in the freedom of will. None of those things were answered by Bakhtiyar. We are racketeers. We're going to break the bones of their case for not giving us what we owe. 3 responses to 4 things they said. Number one, they said that listen, in status quo, in our world, you feel like you can't do what you want to do, and that really sucks. Why? We think that if you are hungry, if you are poor, if you are sick, if you are dying, that hurts so much more than it hurts to not feel like you're able to do what you want to do. We tell you in Masud's speech that these material and physical things come logically prior to anything you say, i.e. the feeling of badness, the feeling of worry and sorrow comes from the fact that you don't have things that you really, really want, i.e. in a world where you think that your existence on this planet is unfairly determined by you unable to get the things you want, which means you are never able to do the things you want to do in status quo, you feel horrid. In a world where they say, listen, you're told you get to choose anything, you have the option of choosing whatever you want to do, and still are unable to do so because your material and physical needs are never met, you are never able to pursue the things you want to, you never get the kinds of happiness they assert that you do. It is downright horrid to assume over here that people who somehow have dreams are going to start chasing those dreams in a world where their material and physical needs aren't met. We tell you that you are much more able to chase your dreams in a world where you're not worried about dying of hunger or dying of poverty. They then have a very interesting thing which revolves around money. They seem to assume that hobbies and passions can only be fulfilled in a world where you are chasing them for material and physical needs. The only choice they maximize is the choice to labor, is the choice to decide how you fulfill your material and physical needs. Notice, anything that you want to do for fun, anything that you want to pursue just for the sheer pursuitness of it, you are free to do so in our world. Because we don't think governments sort of make you position or genetically make you in a way where by their own analysis you don't have desires or hopes or dreams in anymore. We think you are free to chase those in our world. But my second response to this, which is that people don't just consume the world critically like they say they do. Notice their analysis. Even in their world, people are told that you have predeterminism. People are told that you don't choose what you want to do. Religion determines it. Or people are well aware of the fact that they can't do what they want to do. They have to go to jobs. They have to raise families and whatever. Number 3, we tell you that people even right now are told, there's a lot of academia, that you're not racist, you're socialized to be racist. You're not really angry, you're socialized to be angry. Despite these 3 frames being true, people to a large degree still believe they control their own actions. I.e., the person who hates the Baloch in Pakistan doesn't want to believe they hate the Baloch because they've been propagandized to do so. They believe they hate the Baloch because they have reasons to do so. Secondly, we think for similar reasons, all of the choices, etc. you get to make in our world means that even when you are forced to do so, you keep telling yourself that no, I wanted this, I thought of this. Their response to this is, but you're told by the government that listen, we control, you can never change this. You can never change this. Very different from we control your entire mind and life. The only thing we really control is sort of like the jobs you do and the social cohesion, etc. you make. But number 2, sit down. But number 2, and more importantly, we tell you that in a world where even when you feel you aren't making the choices you want to make, but are able to see that you, your loved ones, your lives, everyone you care about is doing so much better, the resentment they assert you will feel against the government isn't true. It is so unresponsive of him to ignore Taha's speech about how you feel particularly pleased with your state because you know the alternative involves you trying to fulfill your hunger, trying to make sure your kids don't die. Notice, in that world either you are probably perfectly aware of the fact that if you are a laborer, you can't just pursue a life of trying to learn the guitar, right? Because you understand that you have to do multiple things and will probably never have time for this. So very unsure on choice. We think if delusional people, the heroin addict, is able to make himself think that I want things beyond material needs, then A, you only cater to extremely delusional people who have no ability to think of anything else. But B, more importantly, we tell you that choice in that instant isn't the most important thing. What is significantly more important is the government telling that person how to live, or the government telling that person, this is how you can live, this is how we ensure you don't die. Their response to this is, but people like kill themselves over fighting a war in Syria that they won't survive either ways. That is a BS response, because the alternative for people to not fight the war is to die either way. People fight a war because they are in a bad situation in both worlds, and so they said, chalo, we might as well do something. That is completely unresponsive to our world, where the alternative is a really good life, i.e. you don't want to go to war, or you don't want to choose to make your life worse because you know this is better, as opposed to the Syrian analogy. I'm sure that your best shot.
You're genetically engineered to do certain things, meaning you aren't even able to access all of the hobbies together you want. The point is, you are genetically engineered, meaning you are a function of the state. Even if you are eating, you are not feeding yourself, you're only feeding the product of the state itself.
That is untrue. No, we don't think you genetically make people such that they only do labor, etc. Because humans still have physical things, etc. that exist. We can't turn people into robots. The robot thing is only in the mind here, right? Which means physically, people will still be able to do all of the other things they want to do. Two, why can't the government just make people, let's say, work from 12 to 12 and not let them do anything else beyond just physical needs of rest, etc. The government needs you to rest, i.e. well-rested people are probably much more productive. Number two, in a world where the government is able to efficiently allocate resources perfectly, you probably don't need a lot of people doing overwork, etc. because you don't have wasted labor and all of those things. This brings you to this last idea of social cohesion, which I will alongside chase with this like dreams thing. They say, listen, in both worlds people have material desires, right? Which is why there's still some advantage of becoming socially better than you, and so racism, etc. will exist. We tell you three reasons for this. One, we tell you that the moment where your material or physical harms are significantly less intense, i.e. there is no life or death situation involved, the intensity you feel of actually picking conflicts over that significantly reduces. Desires ke upar giving up your life is rather unheard of. My second response to this is, oh, dream chasing will happen. People can pursue dreams that don't involve fighting with other people. That's the vast majority of dreams. Number three, I don't know why people are going to systemically try and advantage themselves over an other group when they know that this systemic advantage doesn't mean that they'll always live better lives than the poor. Because the government can consistently keep choosing people, determining based on genetics what to do with them. There is no point of trying to establish some social superiority over another group because you don't get the material incentives that they assert you do. Why does opposition lose this match? For two big reasons. One, they don't mechanize any of the impacts on why you should care about freedom of choice so much. Number two, they give you no reason to believe why freedom of choice exclusively exists in their world and not in ours. Let the motion stand.
Speakers spoke for 7 minutes, 23 seconds, calling upon closing opposition.
Yaseen!
पानी का भी डिनर बाहर है एक सेकंड
किसी के पास पानी है
बोतल में है जी
मिल गया
Starting in 3, 2, 1. I have a lot of fundamental problems with Tahir's proposition here. But the first one is the characterization of what Western liberal democracies literally look like in the status quo. Because judges, for some reason, I think that proposition here thinks that Western liberal democracies are so bad, and people within the Western liberal democracies are suffering so much, and there's high rates of poverty, and there's high rates of people dying from hunger. I simply do not think that's true. As long as that is not true, the only thing that proposition achieves in this particular debate is a marginal benefit to people that do not have these type of benefits within Western liberal democracies. If I simply prove to you on a very simple vein as to why it is more important for you to give agency to those people and as well as the majority that lives within Western liberal democracies, it is very easy for me to win this particular debate. I think that the amount of poverty, etc., within these countries is very limited because of the development of state structures, because of a stable economy. So sure, we agree there are recessions, but that does not mean that every single person in a Western liberal democracy like Scandinavia are suffering in in the status quo. They had to give us reasons as to why this is different from a struggling democracy. The characterization that proposition has is one of a struggling democracy. Take a seat. Number two, I also want you to understand that once you achieve these basic goals that they're talking about on their side of the world, all of the other goals, all of the other needs that we talk about on our side of the world continually become more and more important. What does that mean for the debate? That simply means that if you continuously get all of what you want in your life, then that means that there is a need, and there's a need for getting more and more. Right? What does this more look like? This looks like your ability to get access expression, your ability to get mobility, your ability to access all of the other rights, such as identity, such as expression, that we've already established in this particular debate. Things like representation on a basic level. Take a seat. All of this do not exist on their side of the world. What does that mean again? That means that the level of fulfillment that you get out of continuously only getting your basic needs met is not the same as they're talking about on their side of the world. So their own metric of happiness cannot be achieved as long as your needs are now shifted towards a different thing, and this shift is very, very important, because now you derive that fulfillment from a different shift, and therefore from a different types of need, and therefore I think this agency then also becomes very, very important for the debate to begin with. But thirdly, I want to talk about this weird idea that they gave on the idea how people still believe in religion, etc. I don't buy that characterization, because I want you to understand the progression within religious progression within religious interpretations, or within religion as a whole, or progression within society, for example, you moving to betterment for women, better for black people, etc., is all an example of people questioning the system. So I do not buy the frame that people don't question the system simply because of the fact that people are not rational enough. I think even when needs are met of people still want more, and that more is their identity, is the freedom of that identity to begin with. So black people were not forced to be bad people. Black people were not forced to be in that position because they did not have resources. They were in that position because they were oppressed due to their identity. So Wassay's analogy here simply does not also work in this particular debate. But lastly, take a seat. I also want you to know that if you're doing this job regardless, that means that you're going to do this job for a large amount of time, right? So you're also putting a lot of time in that job. That particularly means that you can't really follow your hobbies, etc. to begin with. But secondly, very important characterization. Again, I don't buy their characterization. That is not the right frame. The right frame here is, if the state genetically modifies you, that means that the state is like to modify you in a way that helps the state. That means that the state is going to modify you in a way that is more productive for the state. What does that mean? That the state does not want people that are musicians or artists, because that does not help the state at all, right? So I'm unsure why the state would even modify people to become artists or become musicians at all, as long as the state's entire incentive is to only have more productive people. Thirdly, weird idea given by Taha. Taha for some reason believes that this is how I determine my destiny. And this is literally the language he uses. Because you are born a certain way, therefore you know that's your identity. So the case that they're trying to run here is simply because I am born strong, that means I was born to be a construction worker on their side of the world. I don't think that's how destiny works for people, right? Because people, when they do not even have the ability to explore other avenues, don't even have the ability to explore other ways or other, professions, etc., that cannot determine their destiny to begin with. That means that the state itself is determining your destiny, and that destiny is not going to give you any fulfillment as long as an external factor decides what your fulfillment should look like or what your destiny should look like in the status quo. I don't buy that frame again, right? But lastly, on this third weird way that Taha tries to frame this debate as well, right? He says that people that are generally going to be unhappy in this debate, unhappy in this world, or people that are unhappy are simply not going to take enough action, or secondly, will not have the ability to take enough action. What does that mean for this particular debate? That means that people are going to live in a constant cycle of hopelessness because they do not have the ability to question the state, A, but secondly, because they can't really bring change to the social order to begin with, right? So they concede that the people are like to be unhappy on their side of the world, but they can't do anything. What does that mean? That every single day or that the person lives, he lives in a state of hopelessness. Thus, hopelessness decreases the fulfillment and contentment with the state that they're talking about. The state becomes generally worse for the people in that status quo. Take a seat. Lastly, weird idea. China has a lot of happy people. China does not. Even after being economically stable, it's around 61st position in the people that are generally happy. So again, Scandinavia #1. If you want to quote examples, you're also losing on examples to begin with. But lastly, the most important thing done, the principle. I'll take a point.
Yeah, your entire claim on discontentment in this world rests on the assumption that this is a significant and severe discontentment which severely hampers my quality of life. Why should I believe it's this rather than a niggling sensation of, I wish I had a bit more?
No, simply, again, this is not a very small level of discontentment, right? Because, again, they assume simply because you now have food on your table, that means that you're not going to question the state because there is no other issue that exists, right? At a point in time where identity, where expression, where change, where progression, all of these things matter equally to you simply because you have a rationale, because you socialize with other people or you have different experiences, that simply goes on to show that people generally want these things in the first place to begin with. So that discontentment is not little, that discontentment would continue to live forward. But lastly, on this idea of progression that they also never talk about, I think in Western liberal democracies generally you have a lot of progression. So in forms of, for example, legislative change, etc., and all of that type of change that you generally get, that means your economic situation is likely to be better, and therefore the amount of people that are also hungry on their side of the world are less likely to exist. I don't know what they're achieving in this debate to begin with. But secondly, on this idea of agency, I think number one, even if it is the illusion of agency, you still have a greater level of agency on our side of the world. What does that look like? That it looks like you having the ability to choose what job you're going to do, what university you're going to apply to, or what extracurricular activity you're going to do in order to get into that university. We think this type of agency is still more important than you having no agency at all. And why is this illusion of agency only existing on our side of the world? Because as long as you do not have the ability to question a state, then that simply means that you already know that this is not the true, that is what you're destined to do, right? You can't really question the state. Then that means that it is not an illusion. You already know that there is nothing that you can do. That means that this hopelessness directly translates into you not having any hope to begin with. I think simply having hope as a human being is enough of a benefit on our side of the world because of the agency you get as a consequence of that. We at opposition allow you to dream. We at opposition allow people to, get that sort of fulfillment because the dream that they chose was their own dream. A state that determines the dream of other people simply cannot get fulfillment for any single person. Economic rights are not that important, even if they're only getting a marginal benefit proposition.
Speaker spoke for 7 minutes, 18 seconds, calling upon opposition reply.
Permission? I'm going to concede to everything right now and say you get all the material needs you get on their side of the house. The point is you can't enjoy them, which was simply the thesis of my entire speech. The reason you can't enjoy them is because you think you are being controlled externally. Why do you think you are being controlled externally? Because you are already genetically modified, because you are already socially modified, meaning the state chooses what role you will observe, meaning the state also engages in what kind of communities you can be in, meaning if you're a construction worker, you're probably going to be spending days with construction workers, as opposed to just engaging in intellectual academia. The reason you can't pursue hobbies on their side of the house is because your ability to pursue those hobbies is limited by that very genetic and social conditioning. The reason this is important is because all of this leads to that abject realization that I do not drive myself. This realization is important because even if I am fed, even if I am kept well inside a sheltered home, I do not feel that it is mine. I am only serving a purpose of the state, which is essentially the autonomous principle that we support on our side of the house. The reason why this matters to individuals and is not just mere discontentment is because it translates onto every single action that you undertake as an individual. Because every single action is determined by the state and by virtue of the conditioning that you initially engaged in. And you can't escape that conditioning regardless of how much you try, because if you try to, the state cracks down on you to maintain social order, you will eventually feel that every single action that you undertake is only if the state complies with it or coerces you into it. This is important because then individuals feel that they are not able to exercise their own individuality and are only existing as functions. This is why they can prove whatever material needs they want to prove, but they can't win this debate because they don't tell us how individuals can experience this only as in terms of their own individuality. The second thing I'm going to talk to you about is the unfair characterization they put on Western liberal democracies by themselves. Western liberal democracies have avenues for identity, for culture, for traditions to prosper, for preferences to change over time. This essentially means that the room for progression leads to the illusion of choice in and of itself. It doesn't necessarily only mean that you have money to do things. It doesn't also necessarily mean that you just have jobs and employment that effectively lets you prosper in life. It means that you have the ability to perhaps exercise your basic autonomous rights as an individual. You can cling to a religion on our side of the house even if you don't have money. You can't cling to religion on their side of the house because you don't have religion to begin with. Therefore, meaning that the autonomous principle, even in terms of the illusion of choice, is taken away on their side of the house, which is why they can't win this. Third, in terms of the state's coercive control and the principle for why individuals should be allowed to vote. This is something they never engaged with after my speech. This is important in terms of the individuals having a say in how the state functions. Therefore, meaning that you feel that you are a part of the state apparatus, and therefore you are then able to make decisions and also calculate the decisions that the state in and of itself makes in the eventual longer run. We think this is important because this is also an extension of the agency principle, because it allows individuals not just to exercise autonomy over themselves, but also the state, thereby influencing policy, thereby influencing economics and identity, and also further progression within their world. I'll accept all of the mental harms that may come from not having food on the table, but you can't exercise material joy that's gotten from those material needs on their side of the house because you can't experience them. What you do have are material harms that exist purely on proposition side, which are paranoia and schizophrenia, and eventually feeling that you are not yourself and being isolated from your own being. This is a mental harm that's far significant than just mere discontent, and it only exists on proposition side of the house. They can't simply say you have material needs and won't think about them. You will eventually think the material needs I met, yes, but what do I do next, which is Umar's entire argument, which is things that eventually, once you're fulfilling the material needs, you're effectively going to make individuals think, what do they want next? Therefore, meaning you're going to spiral into a cycle of skepticism and eventually think what you want from life, but you can't get to it because the state effectively prevents you from getting to it in the first place. Therefore, meaning you will have paranoia and schizophrenia and all of the mental worries existing on their side of the house. The examples I give you for people waging wars that they will effectively lose is that individuals do prioritize freedom and individual autonomy over immediate needs. This is not the response that I wanted from Ashar. This is not the debate I wanted from them, opposition.
Fikr spoke for 4 minutes and 8 seconds, calling upon proposition reply.
Ready? One of the fun things about taking notes on debates that I'm sure you'll all agree with me on is you can tell when bits of content go unresponded to, but more importantly, you can tell when teams decide to make strategic pivots. Not contradictions, because this is a good team, they don't contradict themselves, but pivots. And those pivots are very telling in what they say about the space of the debate. Because you'll note, first opposition cared about real autonomy and real choice. They care about how liberal democracies can ensure and give you access to meaningful autonomy and choice. They got demolished on this, at which point they pivot at second. And this is the very critical pivot in their case. They pivot to how the illusion of choice still lets you access all of the benefits of feeling like a fully self-actualized person and like you are the master of your own destiny. I want to note why this is a fatal strategic pivot for government, for opposition, and why it completely loses them the debate. Critically, because if their point is you can delusionally choose to continue to believe that you have choice, that is symmetric. That is something which happens even in a world where aggressive social engineering occurs. We have warrants for this pre-existing within this material. Because we point out to you that various forms of social engineering already deprive you of choice in open and visible ways in the status quo, and you do not seem to be aware of them. You are not aware that you are a racist because propaganda made you a racist. You think you chose to be a racist. You are not aware that you are a religious person of a certain community because you were born in it. You think I made the active decision using my agency and rationality to do this. When we ask them, why does the same not just apply? Why does the delusion of choice not apply symmetrically? We get no meaningful response except to say the state is controlling you and you're going to know the state is controlling you. Big whoop, the state controls you in every possible world. We control you harder, but nothing about their mechanism for the illusion of autonomy is unique to the side in which the state is not intervening this significantly. This means you do not meaningfully get to access the illusion of choice argument they want, which means real autonomy then becomes the only thing they can fall back on. Let's talk about real autonomy for a second, and this is where they got largely slaughtered, which is also why they pivoted away from it. Because we pointed out to you that in the counterfactual, in the status quo, real autonomy is already something which the vast majority of people cannot meaningfully access in the way they want. Because if real autonomy is about the sort of job you work, for instance, and the vast majority of people do not have autonomy over the job they work, these decisions are made for them by economic circumstance. They try to give you a variety of random claims about how this is not the case, but thus far they haven't actually engaged with that core basic idea. Real autonomy is a fundamentally deprived good. They try a third opposition to come back on this by pointing out, well, Western liberal democracies aren't that poor, so probably real autonomy exists to some degree, right? But the problem here is twofold. First of all, this does not acknowledge at all that even in the event that Western liberal democracies aren't particularly bad, human life with any sort of material worry is still in harm, which uniquely exists inside Western liberal democracy. But secondly, that Western liberal democracies are getting worse both in terms of their economic and political guarantees for their citizens, implying that real autonomy is continuing to shrink. They also neglect all of the autonomous things that you're losing whenever you have any sort of material harm. That is to say, you cannot have real autonomy when somebody shoots you in the face when they're stealing a loaf of bread. You die. And that is something that does not happen in the flip side over here. The other reason that they go on to lose this debate is because they've actually been very dismissive about anything that is not autonomy, right? Their claim here is basically material harm doesn't matter because I cannot enjoy material benefit in a world where I don't feel like I can have my own choices. Put all of that aside for a second, they haven't actually analyzed the flip of this, which is why doesn't material harm make me feel uniquely bad? And the necessary reason that this is important is because their counter claim here is basically just, you feel extremely, extremely deprived of agency and this is an overriding mental sensation. Why was material harm a bigger harm than this? And this is something we shielded at first proposition that they never engage with. Because unlike psychological harms, which can be dealt with through therapy, through reasoning, through engaging with the harm, and ultimately magicked away, material harms are non-negotiable under all circumstances and also produce concomitant psychological harms. And I have no reason to believe one psychological harm of the lack of agency weighs over the psychological harms of stress, of worry, of being unable to feel that you're going to have a meaningful tomorrow. They avoid all of this by claiming that agency precedes and is prior to all of this, but they have not justified this. Finally then, I think that the scourge of humanity for all of time has been hunger, has been pain, has been poverty. All of that literally doesn't exist in proposition. Even if you think agency is a washy question, this is just clearly something which goes to prop. On those grounds, very proud.
Alright, judges can cross-floor shake hands, judges can leave the room to deliberate. Best speaker.